Welcome to Kokstad, welcome to Bryden farming. I'm currently milking 1,750 cows on a low cost of production pasture system. I calve 65% in spring and 35% in autumn. I have a 315 hectare perennial rye clover platform. In autumn and in summer, if the grass is short, I supplement with maize silage. I try to have a minimum 2,000 tons of dry matter fodder bank at any one time. I use about 3,000 tons of silage a year. I grow 250 hectares of maize, mostly under irrigation. What is not cut for silage, I keep for grain. I run a simple system. These are the non-negotiables and targets of the system. Crossbred animal, seasonal calving, residual-based grazing system with a pasture harvest of 14 tons, 55% pasture in the diet, stocked at 4.5 cows per hectare. 450 kg animal, that makes 2,000 kgs per hectare. This is my system and I stick to it. I block out all the other noise. I try to run as low cost of production system as possible. So irrespective of milk price, I'll always be in the game. I can't emphasize enough. You have to be content with your system and stick to it. Then try and perfect it. Too many people overthink this dairy game. One of the strengths of this business is its simplicity. You have all heard of the 90-10 rule. Focus on the 90 and less on the 10. The 90 is pastures, calves, heifers, maize, conception, soil fertility and irrigation. Focus on the key profit drivers in the business. The 10 is the theory you hear from the rep that just walked into your office or what you heard at the pub. I purchase all my maize that I need for the year in July from local farmers in Kokstad, and I store that maize with a local feed company. They grist the maize for me and add protein and minerals. If you buy out of the combine, you get the cheapest maize for the year, 8 years out of 10. Buying maize strategically is a large part of my business. My milking platform is 315 hectares of perennial ryegrass, but in autumn I bring in an additional 70 hectares of annual ryegrass that is grown behind maize silage, an additional 70 hectares that I plant in late February. The platform in winter is 455 hectares. This additional platform is a 4-kilometer walk away from the dairy. Walking cows this far is not ideal, but it is definitely financially viable if the cows are walking to a quality pasture where elevation is not too great, it's not too hot, and if it is dry. If I didn't have this additional platform in winter, I would either be feeding more maize silage or selling cows. I started looking at renewable energy about 5 years ago. Before I start talking about power, you must know from where this is coming from. It's coming from a simple farmer, not an electrical engineer. You must also remember that free advice is often worth as much as you have paid for it. I like to think of myself as an early adapter and not a pioneer. I'm too much of a Scotsman to take the financial blow of a pioneer. However, with my power journey, I felt I was pioneering at times. I knew plenty of people that had put up solar, but I didn't know anyone who had built a microgrid and put in batteries. The journey all started about 5 years ago when I was looking at the sustainability of my business. When looking at the sustainability of my business, I identified 3 things that could cripple my business. The 3 things were and are land, water and power. The land issue we can do very little about, other than be part of organized agriculture and lobby as hard as we can when we get the opportunity, and also invest off farm. Water. I built dams and continued to look at opportunities to store water. Power was the third, so I headed into the dark and out of my comfort zone. At the outset, I realized I was investing a lot of money with people I didn't know well in a subject I knew very little about. Extremely daunting. Before I carry on, I must mention that whatever I say, get a second opinion. Don't trust me, as I'm talking about a topic that I know very little about. The one thing I will say that you don't have to get a second opinion on is the fact that when you are doing a project on your farm, the most important thing is choosing the company you are going to partner with, as it is a partnership. You have to get extremely good references for that company and don't just go for the cheapest. If you are as clueless as I was, and still am, you don't know who is selling you the Tata, the Toyota or the Rolls-Royce. They could be selling you the Tata at the Rolls-Royce price. The company must also have a good rapport with Eskom, and you will understand why a little later. The company had to also be approved by the bank, as I needed to finance the project. An industry that is growing so fast will always attract villains and thieves. One of the first things I learnt was that I had to look at my energy efficiency on the farm first. It is not sensible to substitute energy before reducing energy. I had to look at ways of reducing energy on the farm before I started putting up solar and batteries. I'm a pasture farmer, so by far my biggest power cost is irrigation. I got hold of Bryden from Shockwave, and he looked at all my irrigation systems. Where there were no variable speed drive motors, we put them in. He looked and changed some pumps and some motors. We changed nozzles, sprinkler packages. He put in pressure gauges and sensors. He took out any pressure reducing valves. He installed Pivot Optimizer technology. Pivot Optimizer gets information from the pressure gauges and sensors, and it tells the VSD to ramp up or ramp down the motor depending on the elevation of the pivot and whether it is facing up or downhill. Not only does the Pivot Optimizer save me power, but it also uses water more efficiently. This is the second thing that you don't need a second opinion on. Look at your farm and irrigation and see how you can reduce or get more efficient with your energy consumption. The company I chose to partner with my power journey was Sinani Energy. They became the light in my dark. Steve from Sinani came to the farm, and at the time I wanted to go hard and put in solar panels. He calmed me down and he told me that first he wanted to look at my current setup with Eskom. He looked and assessed, and sometime later he came back to me and said that regardless of solar, we needed to consolidate our power to one central point. You must understand that back in the day, wherever and whenever you wanted a power point, Eskom gave it to you. So I had a whole lot of transformers scattered. Long story short, I consolidated 14 transformers into one. We built a microgrid on 3 farms. Sinani subcontracted a contractor to remove Eskom's 14 transformers and replace them with our own, and we put in a 1000 kVA mini sub. Eskom now don't own any transformers on the 2 of the farms. I have Eskom line coming in feeding my 1000 kVA transformer. The line to the mini sub is all that they own. From that mini sub, we built overhead lines to my new transformers. Some of the lines were existing infrastructure, which we bought from Eskom. We built and bought 7 Ks of overhead lines. We removed 1200 kVA of Eskom's transformers, and we currently have the mini sub set at 600 kVA. The mini-sub can be ramped up from 600 kVA up to 1000 kVA at any time depending on power demand. We were paying line charges for 14 points and for the availability of power that we were not using. Consolidating your power to one central point is the third thing that you can trust me on. My brother and I have a backup generator at each of our dairies. In the past, we would fill up the diesel cart, drive to his generator, drive back to the diesel buzzer, fill up the cart and drive to my dairy to fill up my generator. It took an hour and a half to do that on a good road with dairies about 4 kilometers apart. My heart goes out to those blokes who have a vehicle with one skilled labour unit going from pump station to pump station, filling up generators, with fuel being stolen as the diesel cart leaves. Consolidate your power to one place and have one guard wired to a polygraph. We pulled the trigger on solar prior to us setting up the microgrid. Phase 1, we put in 220 kVA of power onto the roof sheds and then added another 220 kVA ground mounted system. So we have a 440 kVA system at present. Looking back, I do regret putting solar panels on roofs, as they are not designed for cleaning of panels. After having invested a hefty sum into a microgrid and 440 kVA of solar, during times of load shedding, I was no better off than before. I was properly frustrated. Steve had told me, but I hadn't listened, and I am impatient. I didn't have base power. I needed base power. Steve then did a proposal of batteries versus generators, and the obvious choice to me was a container of batteries. 700 kilowatt hours of batteries from Freedom 1. From that day on, load shedding has become a non-event. I am exaggerating a little. When all my irrigation, dairy and staff housing etc. are all on and drawing power during the day, load shedding is a non-event, as the solar is charging the battery. At night, however, with no solar, we can run a full load for 2 hours. If we have 4 consecutive hours of load shedding at night, then I can choose to either turn some pumps off or irrigate for 22 hours a day. A battery gives you options. That is the fourth thing that you don't need a second opinion on. That is that in life and with everything, all you want are options. Not only has it given me options, but it has reduced my stress by giving me the ability to be able to irrigate in the dry spring months, while my mates have the anxiety and frustration of watching their pastures wilt while they have no power. Cheap power is very important to us, but what is far more important is guaranteeing ourselves power. And that's the fifth thing that you don't need a second opinion on. Even if the power situation improves and the Chinese or the like invest in Eskom, what is guaranteed is that Eskom power is going to become more and more costly. My intention is not to go off the grid at the moment. As much as you don't like to hear it, and I don't like saying it, we still have well-priced power in comparison to other countries. Going off the grid is too expensive at the moment. Another thing I must mention is the solar score of your farm will also affect the performance of your system. Luckily, Kokstad has a good solar score. I haven't really found any benefits in gaining carbon credits at this point, but I'm sure it will be a possibility in the near future. Please contact me if you can help me in this field. What is critical, not a deal breaker, but makes the numbers really work, is being able to sell power back to the grid. You need to understand that they're selling back power to the grid, but at what price? Senani managed to negotiate a 1-to-1 return. Eskom don't give you money. They give you back a certain percentage of what you give them. I've heard of some municipalities only offering 20% or a 5-to-1 return. So I was obviously extremely happy with the 1-to-1 return that Senani achieved. This is where the company that you choose will show its true colors, which could make or break your project. The dealing or negotiating with Eskom. This is so important. I keep telling my mates to tell their sons. 1. No good comes from hanging around the pub after 12 o'clock. 2. No good comes from playing rugby after you're 20 years old, unless you're a professional. And the third thing that I must add to that, no good can come from a farmer negotiating with Eskom. Like rugby, leave this to the professionals. Negotiating with Eskom is a huge part of the project. You're removing and replacing transformers, putting in mini subs, buying Eskom lines, selling power back to Eskom. And you're doing that with a company that doesn't return calls or reply to emails. The whole project may sound daunting and costly for some. If you're not in a financial position to install your own, there are companies that will put all this infrastructure at their expense, and you purchase from them at Eskom less. It is known as a power purchase agreement. Sinani offered me this option, but I decided to rather finance it myself, as the benefits were too big. In the 2.5 months of me putting in the batteries, I would have used 500,000 rands worth of fuel. I want to summarize a whole lot of theory into a few points. When I was a Sidara, this is when I used to sit up and listen, when the lecturer used to summarize at the end of the lectures. The 5 theories that I gave you that you don't need a second opinion on are: 1. Choose the right company to partner with when you are doing any project on the farm. 2. Before spending money on power, get a professional to look at where you can save or get more efficient with your existing power on the farm. 3. Centralize your power to one point. I have solar, mini sub, batteries, and backup generator all in one central place. 4. With everything in your business, make sure you have options. Give yourself options. And 5. Cheap power is important, but what is most important is guaranteeing yourself power. This project is a work in progress, and I owe a debt of gratitude to a whole lot of people. All would not have been possible without God's grace and guidance. One last thing. Barriers of entry into dairy are getting higher and higher. The demand for our product is on an upward trajectory. We are in a sustainable industry. Block out the negative rhetoric. Surround yourself with positive professionals in your business and positive friends, and enjoy farming. Focus on the good. We are blessed to be in this industry.